we distinguish between these three different concepts, essentially, of features, capabilities, and benefits. So features are like the usually 1 to 2 word phrases, analytics, a dashboard, chat, that then you can do things with. And the capability is, what do I actually do with this? And so something like triage your comments falls into capability language. And then the outcome or the benefit would be, what actually is the point? Like, why does this matter? What is this going to drive? So you think of input metrics and output, right? Or basically like the things that you do and then the result of doing those things. So in general, we love leading with capabilities, which is what you did here. But a lot of times they have to be clear in order for it to work. Because if you lead with the benefit, right? This is a company called Walnut. If I'm just scanning and I see sell more, sell smarter, sell faster, and I'm not really looking at what's underneath it, this doesn't tell me anything about what Walnut does, versus a company like Tango, which has winter tested their copy to death, and they understand like they really have to answer it. Theirs is like create software how-to guides, turn the guides into interactive walkthroughs, pinpoint usage and improvement. Like these are extremely clear.
Hey, Anthony, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really pumped for this conversation. We've been having a lot of really unique conversations lately in the lead up to the launch of the new general collaboration. And you played a huge role in helping us design our new landing page. And what we're going to do today is talk about that process and how you helped shape what we're going to be launching with this upcoming landing page launch, product launch, et cetera. I found you because you seem to be the most expert opinion when it came to landing pages, positioning, how to talk about products in my network. But instead of talking about why I chose you, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you built that expertise and why people choose you in your opinion. So for starters, thanks for coming on. Let's hear your backstory. How did you become the expert?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a super fun project and excited to share behind the scenes. As you mentioned, I really specialize in product positioning as it relates to home pages. So there's a lot of people who do positioning more broadly. What we find is that when you take a strategic output, which is usually something like a positioning deck, like a PowerPoint slide with lots and lots of pages, what ends up happening is it gets buried in a Google Drive folder somewhere and never sees the light of day. That's like one bad outcome of a lot of the positioning exercises. Another one is, in the process of going from strategy to execution, when you hand over the positioning to someone who's trying to like build a landing page, write a sales deck, create content, in that process, a lot of the positioning will unintentionally get removed and the differentiation will disappear, and it'll be in the name of, we want to tweak the copy, right? We don't really like how this sounds. Let's change it to something else. And in that change, all of a sudden, we've lost the angle. We've lost the thread, and we're back into a place that's very unclear and vague and things like that. So we are like, use the homepage as the primary place to house the positioning, use it as a forcing function to get internal alignment, and use it as a beacon to the internal teams, the external customers, investors. This is kind of how we're positioned. And we think of positioning as answering 4 questions. What is it? Who is it for? What does it replace? And why is it better? So those 4 questions are really what we're trying to answer with every company. And so because we focus on the homepage, and usually with B2B companies, usually in the SaaS space, we've just gotten to do a lot of reps. And if you take it, that slice, I don't think that there's anyone in the world who has helped position as many companies as we have. April Dunford, she's the big positioning lady. We really, really look up to her. And she shared in an interview, she was like, I've positioned 200 companies, something like, who could ever touch that? And I was like, me and my co-founder positioned 300 companies. So again, we still consider her the GOAT. She's the number one. We're content to be the number 2 positioning experts in the world. But we specialize usually in early stage companies, and she's more in later growth stage. So we kind of have carved out, we're not even really competitors in a serious sense. But we've gotten to do this process so many times with so many different industries, so many different teams. So we sort of have seen every possible complicated positioning problem, issue with confusing go-to-market, multiple products, single product. And, we've done projects with huge publicly traded companies, giant enterprises, all the way down to pre-launch, even pre-product companies that are just trying to figure out how to validate what they're doing. So that's a high level of us. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
It's that expertise, that experience that you have is what drew me to you and what made me excited to work with you when it came to positioning GC. General collaboration is, to some extent, it's parts of this could feel like category creation, and we spend a lot of time talking about that. And other parts are we're building on existing habits. We're helping people do something that they already do, just in a better way. And I felt that I was struggling with the positioning, with the language, and I'm so glad that I found you when I did. It's funny to hear you say that one of the issues with people working with someone like you is that they get this content, they get this positioning, and then when they try to pretty it up, they throw away the words and try to make it look a certain way and lose the essence of it. It's funny hearing you say that. The number of Figma comments that I've been writing to our designer as we're implementing the end result, and we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna share a screen and look at what you did for general collaboration. But the end result here is this sort of scaffolding of what the website might look like. The number of Figma comments that I've dropped to our designers saying like, no, content verbatim from the original, do not edit, is shocking, because I think there's a desire to, I don't know, is before we jump into talking about GC and jumping into what you did for us, why do you think that is? Is there like content strategy versus design kind of butt heads? Is that something going on, or how's that problem so prevalent that it was the first thing you called out?
Yeah, I think it becomes an issue because something about speaking in the abstract, it's easy to make decisions until they actually impact the screen. Once you see it in the homepage, then people start to get very scared. Like if they say, we want to position against a particular competitor and we want to say how much better we are. If you take the words that they land on and just put them in a wireframe that looks like a homepage, all of a sudden they realize the implications. Like we often say there's 2 moments of crisis when we work with companies. The first moment of crisis is that there is no silver bullet. And if you want to go after 20 different markets at the same time, we are not some super powered oracle that can solve challenges that just exist inherently in marketing. That we could go after 20 people and this giant broad audience with some sort of super crystal clear message. So like the moment of crisis is like, oh no, we actually may have to do some hard choices and prioritize choosing things. The second hump is once they get over that and they're like, all right, we've made the decisions. We've gotten the strategy. We've got everyone aligned. We're going to move forward. The second moment of crisis is realizing choosing those things will actually impact what we say. And so many people, like, they don't actually get to that second level, and then they're in another crisis mode. And then a lot of times seeing the output in a page will make people go back on the decisions they made. And they don't even realize that they're doing it, but they'll often walk it back as a copywriting critique. I don't like that copy. And they say, well, what do you think would be better? And they just suggest a completely different message, which isn't even the same message, just worded differently. It's truly a different positioning. And a lot of times, like, we'll see that too. Like sometimes when there's infighting in a company, one stakeholder will say, I don't like the copy, and they'll leave all their comments of things they want to change. And it'll just be them pitching the positioning that they might have been really trying to get in the previous meetings, but now as copy tweaks. And if you're not relentlessly focused, you'll be like, hey, remember, we made those decisions. We weren't going that route. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, underlying motives of internal alignment. And I don't think you guys have any of that, because you guys you're a smaller company. So it's not like you're this giant, you have all these department heads who are with their own KPIs and P&Ls and stuff. Fighting each other. But yeah, it's very common, and it is a big problem.
Well, I am putting my fist down on it. I've made sure that the copy is being implemented verbatim. I'm excited to launch the full site soon. But let's jump into what you did for us. And maybe a good place to start is with what you started with, the state of the general collaboration website when we first met.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let me share my screen. So I'll read some of this for our audio listeners so that you can sort of hear. One thing that we did note is that you guys came in with, at the clarity level, you guys came in with a much clearer page than I would say 90% of the people that we work with. So for us, when I first saw it, I was curious what the issue potentially was, given how clear, especially this hero was, right? And you'll see when we talk through, because I have some different assets that will show that your positioning didn't so much as completely wholesale shift as maybe just tightened and narrowed down a little bit more. And we'll walk through what those changes were. But so I'll read this for people who can't see it. H1 headline, never miss a critical comment. H2, subheading, GC's superhuman for comments, and that's in quotes, aggregates your comments into a single prioritized inbox that works inside all the apps you already use. And then the CTA, sync your apps and try GC. So I actually love this hero. I think this is great. Really good copywriting, really clear on the clarity. I can understand who it's for. You're giving like little hints of the type of person who would want this, someone who knows what superhuman is. This isn't for someone who's like, I don't even know what superhuman is. Right? And then even below there, relied on by PMs, devs, designers, and marketers. We're talking about multiple different types of customers who might use you. And then you have these floating around apps, Notion, Slack, Asana, right? Linear, these very highly specific apps that a certain group of productivity users would all know and love. So that part I thought was really, really good. The only ding that I would say is there isn't anything showing the actual product in the hero. So the hero is missing a product explanation. And in a PLG approach where you want people to download it, showing that product is going to be critical, and really explaining exactly what's going to happen. That's kind of what's going to help people slide in as quickly as possible to say, oh, I can imagine myself doing this, and now I want to actually get in the app. So as we keep going down, right, then you have this integration section. GC works inside the tools you already use, docs, wikis, dev tools, databases, design, project management, code repositories, web apps, desktop apps. Yes. I thought this was great, again, but I would say maybe it's potentially the wrong placement of this. Like usually the integrations comes after you've more walked out. This is exactly how it's going to work, how you would use it. And then it's like a checkbox almost of, will this actually work with the apps? Like, wow, you've sold me on the capabilities. You've sold me on the functionality. I'm excited about it. Now I just need to know, will this actually work with my apps? So I was like, I love this section. I think it just could go a little bit lower. And then we even looked at, I remember you shared, and I'll pause here for a second. You shared that a lot of people would see the hero, would scroll down, and then would bounce. What were those statistics you were sharing? Because I thought that was pretty interesting.
So we were using Microsoft Clarity to do that sort of heat map and see what people were clicking on, where people were spending time. And we were seeing a lot of people would immediately go for pricing. And they would spend very little time on the page whatsoever. They would immediately go to pricing. And that's why on this page, we have right underneath that CTA, free forever for individuals. That's something that you kept around and actually made better in the new website. Behind pricing, people would also check the integrations. And we, I guess, misinterpreted that probably, that we needed to raise that all the way to the top of the screen, where I think to your point, it's important. It needs to be part of our story. It probably didn't need to be the second thing in the story before someone even knew what the product did.
Yeah, for sure. And so the thing to me where the biggest area of just messaging improvement came in this section. So things like this, right? And we have a concept where we distinguish between these three different concepts, essentially, of features, capabilities, and benefits. So features are like the usually 1 to 2 word phrases, analytics, a dashboard, chat, that then you can do things with. And the capability is, what do I actually do with this? And so something like triage your comments falls into capability language. And then the outcome or the benefit would be, what actually is the point? Like, why does this matter? What is this going to drive? So you think of input metrics and output, right? Or what's the phrase that I'm trying to think of? Essentially, like, now I'm totally blanking on that piece. But yeah, basically like the things that you do and then the result of doing those things. So in general, we love leading with capabilities, which is what you did here. But a lot of times they have to be clear in order for it to work. Because if you lead with the benefit, right? This is a company called Walnut. If I'm just scanning and I see sell more, sell smarter, sell faster, and I'm not really looking at what's underneath it, this doesn't tell me anything about what Walnut does versus a company like Tango, which has winter tested their copy to death, and they understand like they really have to answer it. Theirs is like create software how-to guides, turn the guides into interactive walkthroughs, pinpoint usage and improvement. Like these are extremely clear. So when I saw your guys' capabilities, they're just slightly less clear than they could be. If I see triage your comments, I don't necessarily know from a scan what that means. And it's supported by these outcomes, which are also not as clear. So prioritizes what matters most, blocks out the noise. So you're always focused. Like these are all outcome language without necessarily having that clear capability to back it up, right? Another one, something even like track your projects is a like, what does that mean, right? I'm in all these projects. What does it mean to track them? It's not super clear. Finally, an automatic single source of truth, outcome. GC understands what docs and what apps belong to what projects. That starts to get at it, but again, it's slightly less clear. And then this concept, right? Follow key stakeholders. What exactly does that mean? You do have it more in the supporting language. GC keeps tabs on stakeholders and topics that matter to you to help you find serendipitous moments to collaborate. But again, we did not have a large product visualization anywhere. So this is still kind of in the minds to try to figure out what this actually means. And without that context, these pieces are less clear, which just creates like some cognitive friction for someone who's reading it. And then even down here, personalized prioritization powered by GC's cross-app AI. Prioritization of what, right? We know loosely that this is about not missing comments, and there's these different aspects, but the prioritization is just slightly less clear. GC learns what comments and content matter most to you and how different docs from different apps relate to one another, which is similar to what you had set up here. So I thought that even without positioning in the picture, just from a messaging standpoint, this could get clarified a lot and read more like a website like Loom. And I think we talked about Loom's page a little bit, where Loom really is like, here's how to use Loom. And each scroll effectively is just walking you through what you do. And it's like, record your screen and yourself at the same time, send these links, share them with coworkers, and then something along the benefits and outcomes of like save time from not having to be in a meeting that you could just send the Loom. So that, I remember, was a big goal for us, was can we get this to be as clear as that Loom page where we're just walking through step by step. So this is kind of a different way that we've captured a snapshot of someone's positioning. And so like the positioning on your page was for the product org at a high level. And that's, PMs, designers, devs, marketers. Marketers are a little bit outside the product org, right? And then there's a concept here around positioning strategy. I'll come back to that in a second. Primary use case being keep track of your comments and keep track of and respond to your comments in each of your work apps. The competitive alternative is really like keeping track and responding manually. That's kind of inferred. And then the problem is really around it's easy to miss critical comments. And then your differentiation is around how you can aggregate these comments into a single prioritized inbox that works in all the apps that you already use. So speak to this, though, because I remember you had two really interesting things. You were like, people keep thinking it's for teams with the product org. And then also I thought you had such interesting insights around the problem summary that you were like, these are type A people who are not missing comments, right? Like that's not the problem angle. So I'd love for you to share kind of those takeaways.
Yeah, so those were two things that I was really struggling with, and that's what drew me to you in the first place and made me know that I needed professional help. I couldn't solve this on my own. On the single player versus multiplayer part, people are so used to a tool like this being a tool that the entire team needs to adopt. They would see us and they would say like, "Oh, is this like Slack?" Or is this like some other messaging app? Or it was confusing. It didn't fit in with any other product that they'd seen before, and they'd immediately think, okay, well, if I want to use this, I'm gonna have to go and convince everyone on my team to use this, and that's a lot of capital of mine, my relationship capital that I have to spend on this sell. So we tried our best to make clear that this was a single player tool. We tried to use that superhuman language, and it maybe helped a little. What we were trying to do was say, like, it's like an email client. It's, I might use Gmail and you might use Superhuman and someone else might use, Apple Mail, whatever they want. We have the freedom to choose, and like the comments are the comments, but the tool that we consume them with is whatever we'd like. We were really struggling with that. The other thing that we were struggling with was, like you called out, this, it's not quite a painkiller. And we're trying to make the case that it's not a vitamin. It's a funny thing to say, but the comparison that we've made a lot, and I guess this is the first time I'm saying it, publicly and recording it, is we've joked that it's like performance enhancing drugs, and that it's not a vitamin. It's not something that, like, there is a problem there that we're trying to solve, and it's not a painkiller where, that type A personality, they don't have a problem with this. I think the other comparison I made is there's like this meme of these like two fish swimming along, and another fish comes up and says to the two fish, "How's the water?" And then the two fish continue on and they turn to each other and say, what the fuck is water? And it's like that. We're like, this is how apps work. We do have a lot of comments, and it's my job to keep up with all this stuff. And we kind of take for granted that problem. So the type A personality, they just plow through it. They figured this out. So to them, it's not this burning problem that needs solving. It's kind of like a flex that they're able to do this. So we needed to figure out a way to, we joked about positioning this as a performance enhancing drug, and the type of thing that once we give this to you, this should make your life so much easier, and you should be so much better at your job that you can't possibly go back to doing things the old way. And that as your teammates see you have this, they're at a severe disadvantage not having this, that they should look at you and be like, whoa, if I'm going to compete, if I'm going to be as good of a PM as so-and-so, if I'm going to keep up with my designer and how effective at collaborating they are, I need this tool. So figuring out how to make it into this, it's not a painkiller, but we don't want to be a vitamin. We want to be that performance enhancing drug, for lack of a better description.
Yeah, for sure. So I thought those were great insights. So this is kind of like the state of where you guys were when you came in, right? And so a big part of what we do with every company and what we did on this project is trying to figure out the best way to answer what is it, right? If we talk about the four questions that constitute positioning, what is it? Who is it for? What does it replace? And why is it different, or why is it better? There's really bad ways to answer the what is it question, right? One is answering with an outcome. If I said, what is GC? It's a great way to make your team more efficient. I haven't really answered what it is, right? If I say it's a mission statement, right? What is it? Well, we're totally reinventing the way that you do productivity, right? Like, again, doesn't actually answer the question, what is it? A favorite feature also doesn't do it, right? It's amazing. It's this AI-powered platform. Like, doesn't really tell me anything. So in general, there are these two approaches to answering the question of what is it? And they are stating the category that you play in or stating the use case that your product supports. And so these represent what we would call category-based positioning or use case-based positioning, right? Category is we think we could be the best tool in an existing category. Use cases, we think we can be the best tool for an existing activity. And so some examples of category was Figma. In the early days of Figma, they called themselves an interface design tool, just right out of the gate. And they said, we are the collaborative one. So product designers knew what interface design tools were, and calling it collaborative by saying you could have multiple people edit the same file at the same time was a brand new paradigm that was not possible with Sketch and Adobe XD and all these other apps, right? Linear is another one. The issue tracking tool you'll enjoy using. Everyone who uses Jira knows it's an issue tracking tool, and usually most people hate it. So Linear's whole approach is basically saying within the issue tracking world, we are the modern, easy to use, and they had like these three pillars that they used in their marketing of they're like, it should have all that functionality of, the global kind of search bar thing that pops up that you can use. It has all the keyboard shortcuts, everything you'd expect, real-time comments back and forth, which Linear doesn't have, Jira doesn't have any of those things, right? The problem with product category is it has to be a real product category, which I think I have a good one for this. This is DocuSign. In 2016, DocuSign said we're the number one e-signature brand. Great. Everyone knows what e-signature is, right? Then in 2020, they said we've pioneered e-signature. Now we've created the world's first agreement cloud, which no longer people know what that is. And then in 2024, they rebanned. Now we're introducing intelligent agreement management. So I joked around that every 4 years we get a new U.S. election, and we also get a new DocuSign made-up product category. So what will happen in 2028? So time will tell. But so there's a challenge of doing a product category that is invented and nobody understands what it means. Another one is like a lot of companies do not want to say the category they're in, right? Like Mural is a company much more than a digital whiteboard. That just tells me they're a digital whiteboard, right? And we've even said this. If you want to find your real product category, just wait till you hear someone on your team say, we're so much more than a blank. That's usually what you are, right? So when we were working with you, what we realized was that there wasn't really a category, right? We had a couple things. We played around with the idea, do you call yourself a messaging app? But we quickly ruled that out because you are not a Slack replacement, right? And you said at one point you were bringing Slack notifications into GC. But what was your reasoning again, why you said we're not going to go that route?
It's just a different type of, like GC focuses on comments, and comments are where work happens. We're talking about the actual deliverables and the conversation about the work, versus Slack is kind of this escape hatch. If I can't have the conversation in a comment on a Figma doc, or I can't have the conversation in a comment on a linear issue, then I escape to Slack because I don't have anywhere else to it. And if I need to escalate from that, it becomes a meeting or a call. It just became overwhelming. So we refocused ourselves, got rid of our Slack integration, and made it all about the comments. But yeah, it's not it's not a messaging app, and messaging tripped up that whole single player, multiplayer thing where like messaging apps we all need to use together. I can't be on whatever messaging app I'm on and you on a different one and be able to talk to each other. That's just not how those things work.
And you were not there's the company Beeper that's like, we're bringing all your messaging apps into one messaging app. That was not what you guys were doing either, right? So this wasn't really a viable option. And then this was, I think, what you had potentially called yourself on the page. This also is more in that, yes, this is probably a good, accurate way of what you do, but it's unknown. It's a new thing. So rather than going that route of let's spend a ton of time and effort educating people to use this phrase, we approach the other strategy, which is answering with a use case and positioning, right? Answering, stating a use case, which is a lot of the PLG companies do. Calendly at the beginning said Calendly helps you schedule meetings. That's the use case. The differentiation was without the back and forth meetings. Schedule, you're like, right? So you could, without back and forth emails. And Calendly could not have called themselves a scheduling tool when they launched because people would be like, I don't know what that is. Scheduling for what? They also couldn't have called themselves a calendar tool because they actually, surprise, don't have a calendar. So they had to basically pick the use case. And then here too, right? Tango, create software training walkthroughs. We looked at them before in minutes, right? They didn't really have a phrase. I think they might be calling themselves something by this point. But again, and the problem with use cases is they have varying degrees of specificity. Even something like Slack, the highest level use case is something like it's for communication. And that has a huge market size, but it is so vague that the message effectiveness is virtually zero. If I have we're the best way to communicate, that touches all sorts of things that Slack does not do, right? Like my older brother is he does coaching for tech executives when they're going to give their first talk at a conference. That's communicating, right? Like, hey, we're the best way to communicate. Oh, so I should use Slack to help me prep for my upcoming speech? Probably not. On the flip side, you could go hyper specific and be like, we're not just for communicating, we're for team communication, and not just any team, we're for design teams, and not just any blanket design communication, specifically communicating around design reviews, and not just any design reviews, specifically reviewing wireframes for mobile. Like, you could run this as a targeted ad for designers, and it would be probably pretty effective, but again, tiny market size related to overall what Slack is trying to go for. So they actually landed on the homepage more around team communication and specifically like team and work, because Discord is a competitor of theirs, and Discord was around team, but it could also be like your gaming friends and stuff. And Slack made a concerted effort to not do that angle and to go more into work. And then, they'll run specific go-to-market plans and things like that for these lower level ones, right? So for us, the tricky thing, and I thought actually our most interesting conversation came after the first iteration, which was when we had that phone call. That's where I felt like the really important piece was that we had to figure out, because the first thing we talked about was, is it managing work communication more broadly, or is it responding to work comments across my apps, right? And we ended up, at first, we took the slightly more detailed one, and then we had a really interesting conversation after where you basically had walked out, but we have these other interesting use cases that we would like to position on, things like following projects and following people. And this was one of the fork in the road moments, and time will tell if we made the right decision or not, right? And we could talk through why, and I can tell you too why I was pushing for one way over the other. But this was an interesting question: was, do we try to find a unifying use case that could cover responding to the comments aspect, keeping track of everything happening across apps and projects, and keeping track of what a single person is doing, like following someone? And my take, again, history will tell if this was the right angle to take or not, was twofold. One, I felt like it was going to be hard to find a unifying use case that would actively communicate these types of things in a clear way, that someone would bundle these things together and say, yes, I'm doing all three of those things, especially because some of them were newer. And then another angle that I remember we chatted through on the phone was, is one of these going to be a wedge in to get them to download the product, and then you can start to reveal more things, show them these other things as we keep going? And so I had these two different, maybe even three. One of them was this, which is essentially, it's sort of like the orange chicken Panda Express example where people will stand outside of the Panda Express with free samples that have orange chicken on them in order to get them inside. And their hypothesis is if they like the orange chicken, which is their best-selling product, they will probably like the other things that we have in the place. If we just hold the menu out, like we have a plate with all sorts of different samples, it's definitely too much cognitive load to be like, what am I even looking at? And people won't take it because they're afraid they might pick something they don't like versus like, here's the best thing, let's get you inside. And so taking an angle of, is comments your guys' orange chicken? And then once they're in, they can start to discover other things, right? And another metaphor, the homepage as the storefront. It's what are you going to put in the windows to get them inside where they can discover the rest of the things, right? Your all other stuff that's interesting. And then one more thing that I wanted to show too along these same lines was how I first interacted with Notion. Notion is an extremely powerful product, but this, and I've heard a lot of other people say that this was representative of what they did too. My first thought when I got Notion was I'm looking for a better note-taking tool, and I was using something like Evernote, right? So when I was looking for a better note-taking tool, someone said you should try out Notion. I went to the homepage and I signed up. And then I was like, wow, this is way cleaner than Evernote. And I start making lists, looking at those, how you can have blocks. I'm learning this new paradigm. And then I was like, wow, this is awesome. I have notes and tasks all in one place as I'm starting to do task management. And then over time, I see the calendar comes in there. Then I'm like doing nested pages. I'm integrating it. And then eventually I'm like, it's my second brain. I can't imagine life without it. And this was more the PLG approach where the product really was explaining and revealing the rest of the cool things. And if they didn't win me on the note-taking aspect, it is highly unlikely that if they had presented in the early days, because this was when Notion was just starting, I was like a relatively early adopter. When they were just starting, if they had hit me with, this is a brand new paradigm of work, it's the way to reorganize everything, it's a whole new concept, I probably would have said, I don't have time to figure this out. And I never would have downloaded it versus getting me in the door and letting the product do the growth, like the whole PLG example. So again, I'll pause there because we had long discussions about this. And again, we are not the oracles who can tell you exactly how to find product market fit. And we've just seen this a lot of times, and especially with PLG companies. But yeah, I would love to hear what was your thought process? How did that conversations go from your end and all that?
Yeah, so this was a really tough one. Now, the product up until now, like the product prior to this launch that we have coming up, really was focused on that initial use case that we talked about of responding to work comments across all my apps. We were at our core this comment aggregator. We take all your comments in, we help prioritize which ones need your attention. We make it really easy to action those, make sure that you have people following up to them, whatever. We're layering on new features that for us, it's us starting to realize our vision beyond that foundation of, okay, now that we have your comments, now what? And there are two features that are part of this upcoming launch that we thought were exciting enough that we needed to talk about them to some extent. And they're the ability to follow a person and the ability to follow a project. And these are things that, to that point earlier of a type A person, they are responding to their work comments. Things aren't slipping through the cracks. They might be running around like a chicken with their head cut off to do it, but they're able to do it. Where these two new functionalities, following people and projects, are things that really aren't possible today. Following a person, what we're allowing you to do is, I could follow Anthony, the person, and see what are the comments and what are the docs that Anthony is spending time in across all of these different apps that we use at work. It's kind of like calendar stalking-esque, but in the context of like, what are you working on? What are you focused on? So if you think about that for following my manager, I can see like, what does my manager care about? And where can I add value? What are things that I should be focused on? What are things that I might want to talk about with them? What do they care most about? Or flip it to another use case. Maybe I'm a product manager at a company and I've got a designer on my team that kind of question if they're working on the right things. If I follow them, I can see like, well, what are they talking about at Design Crit? Do I need to interject here? What do I need to do to make sure that the train stays on the tracks? It's stuff that you can never do before. But to your point, it's stuff that people have never really dreamed of doing before either. So how the hell do you talk about this stuff? So maybe you want to pick up and talk about what you recommended and what you convinced me of, because you showed me the light on this one. I'm really happy with where we landed.
Yeah. And I remember there was a key moment in that conversation where we also talked about, is one of these other use cases actually the orange chicken, right? Did we have it wrong? Was comments Is that the thing that'll get people inside the app? Or is it actually one of these would be more interesting? And I think the phrase that you had said to me, you were like, every single user we have who's in the app and is not churning is managing their comments, but they're not all using those other features. And again, you may discover after this big launch, because right, you're doing a product hunt launch, you may discover, let's say 6 months from now, 12 months from now, maybe one of these things really does start taking off, and you may want to reposition and say, actually, comments becomes the additional feature, right? The Kung Pao chicken, or the, whatever you want to say, the crab rangoon from Panda Express, and it's really more actually about this. And then you would do the same exercise again, and maybe there is a key use case, like, because we even talked about some potential examples, the ones you mentioned, right? We could position this as like the help me as a manager keep track of what my employees are doing, right? Like see what everyone is working on across, because I can't keep eyes on this. In the old days, you could walk from room to room. Now everyone's doing everything remote. So you've lost visibility and like what people are actually working on. That there's this like almost like a Big Brother-esque thing, but maybe in a nicer way to put it. But, we talked about some of those other angles, and you're like, no, I think it probably still is the entry point for now, based on what is probably this comments feature. And if they like that, and, pretty quickly in the app, you could say, hey, follow over here, your employee, you could see what they're commenting. And all of a sudden we've easily brought them into the next really cool feature without having to do a lot of explanation, just through the product's engagement. So what we ended up landing on, which was effectively, and this is like I actually don't think we had this exact format of the canvas when we worked together. So this will just be a fun little addition you can take home. But this is basically a newer way that we've framed these things out, where in the new positioning, effectively, we are taking a use case-based strategy. We're still leading with the primary use case of keeping track of or responding to comments across the apps. The product category kind of takes a back seat because we're not really doing the category-based positioning. We are targeting, people in the product org, but even this, it's more along the lines of these productivity-oriented knowledge workers, right? We don't even necessarily need to specify the department because it could be used by any of these departments. It could be customer success. It could be whoever. Again, company type, not really relevant to the strategy, which is totally fine. We picked 3 competitive alternatives to anchor against when we talked about doing this use case. So it's like, how do people do this use case today? We had some discussion. Do we want to just anchor against one? And we picked 3 to kind of give an overarching picture of kind of that managing in the weeds of how it's kind of annoying, right? You could just jump from app to app manually. This is kind of distracting and annoying. You can rely on the notifications being pushed to Slack, but they get buried beneath the main channels. And you can rely on email digests, right? Like when email sends me, hey, here's all the stuff that happened in Asana. They're usually, though, like only once a day or twice a day, and they bundle the notifications in very strange ways. And then for here, it's like, well, what do you guys do different? We allow you to bring all your app-specific comments and at mentions into one place, so you don't need to jump between apps anymore to respond. And then we basically wanted to walk out exactly how does this work, right? You can connect your work apps. You can start to bring the comments into one place. You can respond all from inside of GC, and essentially you can reach this done, which is like this comment zero aspect that you guys had even in the first page. And so the way that we threaded the needle between not totally excluding those other features was in the first version that we had looked at, we basically had 1, 2, 3, 4 scrolls that represented these 4 parts explaining the managing comment use case. In the second version, and we can go through this part by part, basically we stole a small user experience element from Calendly, and I'm curious to see how you actually end up doing it. But basically,
ripped it off entirely. Looks exactly.
I love it. Oh, that's great. So, and I thought I had a screenshot of it in here, but maybe not. Effectively, what it is you only see the top open one, which shows you what it looks like in the product. And then when this has a little scrolling bar, and when it finishes, the next one opens up, or you can click to open it. So it doesn't look nearly as overwhelming. You could still look at like the high level of how it works end to end, and you can click and see more details or wait to see more details as it scrolls through. And so what we did here was we took multiple scrolls around that use case and put it into one scroll. And then immediately next, we elevated these other use cases, right? Following projects and following people. So it was sort of a way to thread the needle. We still have a primary use case, but we're not completely ignoring these other features that might stick out or be interesting. And so that gets represented near the bottom of the canvas, right? Follow people, follow projects, and then also highlighting some additional features. So we could, if you wanted, we could just go through the new wireframe section by section if that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that would be an awesome way to start to wrap things up. What I love about how those three sections work together, and what I love about this website in general, is that you really helped us tell a story where we're taking the user along this journey, and kind of like you said to that Notion flow chart of like, here's where you start, here's you coming in the door, and here's the stuff that you're going to have over time. Here's why you're going to stick around. So yeah, let's go through what the new website's going to look like.
Yeah, so this was sort of what we landed on. We did many iterations to get to this copy, right? And if it gets tweaked after, I'm not going to be offended. So you don't have to be religious about it. If you're like, oh, we found a better way to say it, that happens a lot. This is where we landed in the project, but you'll iterate on it and stuff, which is totally fine. H1, one app to comment back. Every comment, thread, and mention from all the apps you use at work in one inbox. Try GC. And I actually, even after project concluded, I thought of one other CTA that you could potentially use that I've just seen on some other PLG products that really denotes that it's single player. And it's basically I think I got to look at the exact wording, but and I'll even pull in, I had an example here, I think, because I just saw one today that I thought would be, it's basically what you could try as a step would be having this, and I'm pulling it into Figma, basically download for Mac. Like when I see this, I'm like, oh, this is just for me. So that might be something worth trying, just as a side note.
I like that a lot. It tells you that this isn't something I'm signing up for an account. I'm downloading it and using the damn thing. Yeah, that's really good. We'll definitely do that.
So free for individuals. Eventually we'll want to put this product hunt piece. And then I think elevating some of those testimonials up to the top, and without necessarily having to say this is only for PMs, marketers, whatever, right? Just letting the selection of audience be shown in your testimonials, right? So I'm seeing product managers, I'm seeing some founders, and you'll see some other ones too, right? Like you have some all over. And so for people who are watching on this, basically we're looking at the wireframe, and we have these, basically the boxes from what we landed on in the first strategy sessions are on the left, and they translate over with color coding. So when we talk about the benefit, it's in blue. So we code the main benefit copy in blue. So that's why we're not actually suggesting the copy should be these wild colors, which we've had some clients who are like, I like the overall flow. I don't know if about putting all these different font. And I'm like, oh, no, sorry. Let me explain that. So second section would be what we call like a problem section. And this is, you can either think about it as a problem section or a differentiation section. It's really just trying to answer those questions, right? What does it replace and why is it better? So this was sort of what we landed with, just trying to paint the picture. Keeping track of your comments shouldn't be this annoying. And then highlighting those alternatives, right? Manually jumping from app to app keeps you stressed and distracted. Sending comment notifications to Slack buries them below all your channels. Apps email you when you're mentioned, but only once or twice a day. And then pivoting to this section, really all about the end-to-end explanation of how do we manage comments, right? So headline being one inbox to rule them all. No more playing whack-a-mole with your notifications. GC helps you clear them out 80% faster. And that was a really powerful benefit, I thought, around speed, kind of along the performance-enhancing drug. 80% faster is very fast. And then the high-level, section by section, connect your work apps. GC plugs right into your personal tech stack. Just log into the apps you use for work and get started in seconds. Bring your comments under one roof. Get total visibility into every comment and document update from a single screen. Right back, right there. Respond to any conversation without leaving GC or teleport to the exact thread for additional context. Inbox 0, meet comment 0. As you respond to comments, they'll get moved to the done tab in case you need to go back to them later. And then hitting these two other sections, and we had some discussion around the copy. I think that it's helpful for it to be mirrored in this parallelism structure. So it's like you can follow projects, one feed for each project. GC is the first single source of truth that isn't just marketing fluff, because we all say that, right? See an auto-updating feed of what's happening in Jira, Figma, Notion, etc. for each project you're managing. And then the follow people use case, one feed for each person. Be the first to find out what's going on across your org. Keep tabs on what your coworker, your boss, and your boss's boss are talking about across all their apps. And then getting to that sort of feature grid section, right? Superpowers for the super user, keyboard first, which is really around the shortcuts, 60 plus shortcuts. So you can do what you need, trackpad free. Comment reminders, stop marking in red. We'll revive a thread when you have time to respond. And then nudges. Never drop the ball. We'll let you know if you have a question or if a question of yours never got a response, so you can follow up. Then high level, right? Testimonials, FAQs, CTA, and this was stolen directly from Figma, which I love how clear it is. Figma, I think, has used it for a long time. So sometimes when I see these really, really big PLG companies and they're using certain things, I'm like, I know that they have A/B tested this absolutely to death. And so sometimes like, the best artists steal, or whatever they say, right? So that's kind of the flyover of the page. And I know we're getting close to our time, so just wanted to wrap that up.
This is fantastic. And it really was so helpful the way that you helped us tell this story and create a narrative that I hope that our potential users, that our future users are going to be able to put themselves into that narrative, understand, see the reflection in the mirror of like, yes, I have this problem. Yes, I understand that this is an annoying thing that I do. And I believe in these features and the ways that GC is positioning itself. I want to try this thing and check it out. And I think the order that you nailed it in, the way that we're focusing on that aggregating comments and that thing that we do to get people in the door versus muddying the story with talking too much about people and projects, it's fantastic. I cannot thank you enough for all the help that you've done so far. I can't wait for you to see the final result of the website. We are in the final stages of designing it right now. By the time this episode airs, you'll be able to check it out at www.generalcollaboration.com. Anthony, any closing remarks, any final things that you want to leave the crowd with? For one, where's the best place to follow you, to keep in touch? If someone wants to work with you on their website, where can they reach out?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's the best place to keep in touch with me. We post a ton of content, me and my co-founder, Robert Kaminsky. So definitely give him a follow, and even a connect request, right? We basically connect with everyone. So I'll probably shoot you a message, how'd you find me? And you could point out this show, and we can get some good attribution, right? For how many listeners are coming through. And then, if you were interested in working with us, it's fletchpmm.com, and use our homepage as a test of what we preach, right? Can you figure out exactly what we do, how it works, and all those things, clarity, just by reading our homepage? If not, don't work with us. But hopefully it's very clear to you, and maybe will be interesting.
It's an awesome webpage. The before and afters that you have up there, it's kind of similar to what we just did on this episode, but you do some incredible work. I'm so grateful that you helped us out at General Collaboration. And thanks again for joining on the show today. Have a great day, Anthony.
Thanks so much for having me. You too.
Bye.